Well, good afternoon from the lofty summit of Bar Moor, which means big summit. It's not huge, 126 metres high, but it is, with a name like that, big summit, you'd expect it to be the biggest thing around, and as you can see, there's really not much else of this height around here. If you're wondering what that is off in the distance, that big long thing on the horizon, that's Jura. And where I am here is, well, I'm in Argyll. I'm in mid-Argyll. I'm in a part of the world which I've never actually visited before. I've driven along the fringes of Loch Gilphead, which is somewhere off to that way, and I've been down to Kintyre, the Mile of Kintyre, which is what this peninsula is, heading down that way. We're some way down that peninsula, but sort of stuck out on an individual peninsula called Taynish, and this is part of Knapdale. This whole region south of Loch Gilphead, going down towards Knackered, that sort of way, is called Knapdale. It's funny, it sounds very English, it sounds Cumbrian, it sounds like from that part of the world, or Yorkshire, Dales, that's what it sounds like. So when you say Knapdale to people, I think people in their heads think maybe it's further down south. But the name the name's made up of two words, naps and dales. Naps are these high-sided ridges. They're quite steep. These don't look so steep, but there's a series of ridges and they all run from southwest to northeast, sort of a series of them, quite steep-sided. They're your naps, and in between those are these sort of fen, flat mire areas, and they're your dales, Knapdale. So it's a curious landscape, really, really strange. It's famous these days for having the location of the Scottish Beaver trial, the 5-year programme where beavers are brought over from Norway, and we're releasing one of the lochs in there as a 5-year trial to see if beavers can be a viable thing to reintroduce to Scotland. It's logical that they would have chosen here because the lochs are flanked by very steep sided hills, and it's difficult for these animals to sort of get up out watercourses easily. It's an easy place to monitor. I did go looking for them yesterday at the trial site, but found plenty of evidence, a few gnawed trees, a few dams, but no beavers. I was there at dusk. They're largely nocturnal creatures, so you do have to be be patient. But this time of year, October, November, it's quite a you're out at dusk around 4 or 5 o'clock, which is when you start eating. You're getting hungry. So I didn't last very long. I was there about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. It was getting dark, and then I got hungry and I left. But it was a beautiful spot anyway, really beautiful spot. The part that I'm in now is a peninsula within Knapdale. This is called the Taynish Peninsula, and this is a national nature reserve. It's 5 kilometres long, all from there, stretches all the way up. So not far beyond here actually, just to here, and it's about 1 kilometre wide at its widest point from here to here, so it's not huge. But what makes it really special, and the reason why it is a national nature reserve, is because it's a habitat which is incredibly rare in this country and quite scarce in Europe and globally. This is, you wouldn't think it to look at it on a nice dry day like this, but this is a very wet part of the world, Argyll. And the fringes of the coast like this is home to something called the temperate rainforest. You might have heard people talking about the Caledonian rainforest or the Scottish rainforest. That's what this is. And when you think of rainforest, you think of jungles and big spiders the size of your head that are going to bite you, or snakes that are going to inject venom into you or something like that. Nothing like that here, but it is a rainforest too. Temperate means moderate, so it's kind of a description, moderate rainforest, not quite as wet as rainforests in the tropics, but still very wet. Typically you need to have about 1,500 millimetres of rainfall on average a year, but sustained across the year, not just all in one go. It needs to be a damp, humid place all year round to be qualified as a temperate rainforest. And it also needs to have a stable climate. Being on the coast, we're moderated by the Gulf Stream, which is coming up, but also just by the sea anyway, so you're not going to have the extremes of temperature that you have inland in places like Aviemore, where when you get the high pressure in winter, you're going to be down to -20. You're not going to get that here. It's warmer on the coast, and the summers tend to be quite cool as well, with mist and fog and sea breezes. So it's somewhere that's moderated by its coastal location, so it has quite a stable temperature. It doesn't widely vary that much, doesn't fluctuate too much throughout the year, and it's that stability that gives it such a profusion of wildlife here. Now maybe you're thinking, but there's lots of woodlands that are very wet, that could qualify as being rainforest on the west coast of Scotland, and you'd probably be right. Very soggy place, lots of soggy woodlands. But what makes this one special, and the reason why it's designated as a National Nature Reserve and a triple SI, Site of Special Scientific Interest, and a special area of conservation, is the fact that it's made up of oak trees. It's oak woodland, and the other thing that makes it special is how long it has been here. And once we come down a little bit into the woodlands, hopefully you'll see why this place is so special, and we'll get a better sense of the makeup of the forest once we get down into these trees. For the moment though, just enjoying being up high, which isn't something I've done much of. People who follow these blogs I do, are probably be wondering where on earth I've been. Seeing as my last one, well, not my last one that I posted, but the last one chronologically that I did was in March on Mull and Iona. But since then, been away. I've been away in Canada for a few weeks, where climbing up and down mountains, amazing views, glaciers, all that kind of stuff. Really, really great stuff. But soon after coming back, I went on a walk up Benvironment, and coming down, my knee wasn't happy. So I've been essentially off the hills for months. Months. It's driving me mad. So I've been limited to modest wee things. And even something like this, which is only 126 meters high, is more than I've done recently. Hence, not many blogs done. It is a nightmare. I know plenty of people personally, and also people I know who were kind enough to comment on these blogs when I put them up. I know there are a few injuries out there, a few of you are sporting injuries. It's not pleasant, is it? To be kept from doing the thing that you love doing. But you have to address these things when they happen. It's not enough to feel the niggling pain and then just think, oh, I can walk through it, or I can ignore it. Especially as you're getting older, I think things do start to catch up with you. I was going to say months, but years of bad habits. What's interesting is I have insoles in my shoes now, and I have done for a few years, but I've had them adjusted in the last few months. And no one ever says to you when you're younger, when you're growing up, at schools or that, no one ever takes you for a full evaluation on how you stand, whether you've got flat feet, how the arches of your feet are, how you're standing with your back and your shoulders. No one ever really evaluates these things as a matter of course. Not unless you've got really, really savvy parents who think you should have an evaluation like that. But if these things aren't picked up early, then you're walking in a peculiar fashion, maybe on flat feet for your whole life, and it's sending everything else in your body out of whack. Because all these things impact upon something else. So if you are feeling niggles, like I was in my knee, it wasn't hurting. Well, it was when I came down Benvironment, to be fair, but up to that point, my left knee just felt weak. It just felt, when I was standing still and then moved off from a standing position, it just felt weak. Like it didn't really have the strength in it anymore. And that was enough to send me to the physiotherapist in March, I think it was, when I came back from Mull. I thought I'd best have it checked out. But it's been a niggling problem since then. And it isn't quite right. I was hoping it was going to be alright for now. And that's part of the reason why I'm here in Knapdale and going to Argyll, where there's nothing enormous to climb. I didn't want to be tempted. I wanted to go to Glen Affric because this time of year, October, the colours in Glen Affric are unreal. So I quite fancied doing that, but I didn't want to be tempted by having enormous, great big snowy, hopefully, mountains staring at me. So, because I knew I would. I've been stupid in the past. I've had sprains, knees, ankles, and I've gone up hills regardless. Had two bad injuries, I suppose. One of them was coming down Binnon Moor, where I thought I might die. That was horrific. And I had a grade 2 sprain in my knee when I heard something snap. I was out of action for months because of that. And the other one, foolishly, was coming down Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, trotting down the tourist steps, and I didn't have boots on, I just had trainers on, which normally shouldn't be a problem, but I was trotting down these steps quite quickly, and I remember thinking in the back of my head, this isn't sensible. You've got no ankle support at all. And on the last step, I sort of leapt off onto the last step, to sort of onto the level ground again, and just went, ooh, and that was it. But I had a walking, on both cases, I had walking holidays booked the next week. But I still went. And after that ankle injury, I went up Sleach and Benay and Chellac. I mean, stupid, so stupid to do that. Like I say, I wouldn't do that now, but you know what it's like when you've booked something, you've booked a holiday or something, and you finally get there, and you just don't want your holiday to be ruined. It's the same thing, I suppose, when people come up to Scotland in winter and they're determined they're going to get some winter walking in, and then the avalanche forecast is atrocious, and then people just head out anyway, I think, because you're there, you've come up from a long way away, you've got that week, you spent that money, you don't want to be sat in the pub. Well, you do, but not for a whole week. So I think the temptation's always there, so that's why I'm here in Knapdale avoiding temptation. Actually thinking back, it was actually that walk I did up Bidjan Nambian in November last year. I don't know if any of you remember that blog, along the Lost Valley. I always underestimate how far it is to come down that hill from Stobcorrie Nan Locha. When you come back down to Glencoe, it's a huge descent, and there's no real let up. It's not like parts of the Cairngorms where you might have a steep bit and then you've got some sort of plateau to give your legs a rest. There's nothing like that. It's just, and there's steps as well, which is never good for your knees, and it's all on rock, so it's quite a pounding descent. And I remember just something. It's like I almost kicked my knee free. It didn't hurt, but I just remember thinking, oh, that's weird. And then ever since then, there's been this niggling little, not pain, but just weakness in my knee. So that walk compounded the problem, I dare say, but isn't responsible in itself. Like I say, it's a lifetime of how you walk, your shoes that you use, all kinds of things. But you do need to, when you feel these things, when you feel these niggles, don't sit on them. Don't just think it will go away, think you can walk through it. The sooner you actually go and sort it out and get it treated and get some physiotherapy or anything like that, exercises, stretching something I never used to do, but I do a lot of it now. All those things help. So yeah, do go and get them sorted if you're feeling those niggling pains. But it is nice just to be up high after all this time, above a tree line, and it's modest, but it's stunning. This is absolutely stunning. Yesterday was sunny, and the colours here in Argyll just now are unlike anything I've ever seen before. So beautiful. And yesterday when the sun was out, everything's golden. I mean, it's incredibly beautiful. Today it's a bit of a flat light and it's quite murky, but no less beautiful, I don't think, which you're about to find out when I turn the camera around. Well, how about that? Down there is Valach. Down there, where I've just had a lovely soup and scone. And we're looking out still into Knapdale, essentially, which you can see way over there, which is getting towards where the Beaver trial site is. But over here, my big finger it can focus on. You can see these little notches in these ridges here. Those are essentially that's the undulation of these ridges, these naps, and they come back the way in big long lines. And you'll either have locks in between, or you'll have these peaty, miry areas that are quite flat, but they're deep deposits of peat, up to 9 meters apparently. Some of these deposits of peat in between these naps. But it's really beautiful. It's stunningly beautiful. It's very popular. It's the English half term just now, so there are lots of people up here. But you get the sense that these places are popular anyway. Argyll's somewhere that I've never really been to. When I go away for a week or two, I never come to places like this. I never come to forested areas that are quite undulating without big hills, because I tend to go where the big hills are, or the big open moors like Sutherland. So this is a new thing for me, coming to somewhere like this, and it's blown me away. It reminds me very much of the southern tip of Norway. I'm quite fortunate. We've got friends who live right at the southern tip, and it's fjord country, of course, like most of Norway, coastal Norway is, but it's not the sort of the sheer fjords that you see up near Bergen and beyond. It's not that sort of glaciers, sheer, deep, really deep fjords. It's not that kind of thing. It's much more gentle, much more wooded, lots of birch and oak, which is what we've got here. And it looks very much like this. It looks very, very similar. I suppose when I have been to Norway, actually, you can't help feeling in that part of Norway that that's how Scotland should look, or did look, a long time ago, before we lost a lot of our tree cover. And seeing this gives you a sense of just what we've lost. Anyway, I think we'll go back into the trees. I'll tell you a little bit about what makes Taynish so special. So we're now descending into the forest here, and from this just on the edge of it, it looks much like any other forest you might come across coming down off a hill. All starts off very familiar birch trees, gnarly old birch trees, which of course are widespread across the whole of Scotland, but you'll see a lot of them looking really, really gnarled, mangled, crooked places in the damp places on the west coast, places like Wester Ross, having sort of ancient, well, they're not ancient, I suppose, because they don't actually grow to be very old birch trees, but they grow very, very crooked, look very old. You're probably quite familiar with those, but as you get further down into this forest, it starts to look a bit different. I don't know how much time anyone really spends thinking about the kinds of trees that you walk through, just as a matter of course when you go off working your way up a hill, but they tend not to look like this. This is something quite rare. This is oak woodland, but it's right on the coast. It's right on the Atlantic coast. It's got, as far as oak trees go, they're not the ones with enormous girth like you get big old English oaks down south. It's not like that. These are quite slender, quite tall. There's a nice open canopy. All of quite an equal height, I suppose. There's not a great diversity in terms of ages of trees in here. I'm not sure if that's because it's been actively managed, but it certainly looks unlike any other deciduous woodland that I can remember being in. It's very, very beautiful, especially this time of year with the colours coming through. And you might think that a forest is a forest is a forest. But it's not the case, and these oak woodlands are extremely diverse in the variety of species they have. They're very biodiverse. Oaks generally are host to large numbers of different species. Different trees are good, better, worse than others, depending on where they come from. I mean, sycamores, for example, which aren't native to this country, were brought here. On younger sycamores, they're not home to as many species as a native oak is. As they get older and much more mature, then they tend to be home to a few more things. But generally speaking, things like willow and oak are home to so many different animals. So oak woodlands anyway are very, very important habitats in themselves, but Taynish, this place, taking the oak woodlands coupled with salt marsh that's here and the fen habitats as well, the coastal habitat, it's incredibly diverse for species. I don't know what the figure is for the number of species they found here, but it's something like, I think it's 250 different species of moss, which it's a very damp place, of course, so there's lots of mosses. 250, and that's about, I think, a quarter of all the species that are found anywhere in Britain. So very, very intense concentration for one small place. Remember, it's only 5 kilometres by 1 kilometre, 5 square kilometres. I think 450 species of lichen, hundreds of species of plant, over 100 species of bird. There's otters, of course, on the loch, and this is all made even more special by the fact that this is an ancient woodland. That's a term that you can hear in different parts of the UK, and it means different things depending on when the oldest, most reliable maps were formed. In Scotland, it was 1750, when General Wade, after the Jacobite uprising, he wanted to do a military survey of Scotland, so he did a survey of the land, of assets, essentially. So that's the best indication we have of how long forests have been. If you could look at maps from 1750 and you can see that the forest has pretty much not changed in all that time, then it's classified as being ancient woodland. And its woodlands are, they're more biodiverse the longer they've been there. If you just go and plant trees in a felled area, if you go and clear fell somewhere, turn up the soil and then go and plant lots of trees and go back there in 100 years, you're not going to have the same diversity of species that have been there in a forest which has been there for 400 or 500 years. They become ancient and they change the very makeup of the soil depending on what's growing. So this one's very important, but more importantly for this one, it doesn't go back just 250 years. It's actually been traced via the pollen record, I think, and other things. They know that this has been here pretty much since the ice retreated, so it's been here the best part of 7,000 years. There's been a forest here, a broadleaf forest like this. So it's very, very rare in these islands now to have a stretch of forest which hasn't been tampered with at all, pretty much. I mean, obviously people have been coppicing, cutting, felling, grazing, but for the most part this is a landscape, a small peninsula which has been protected and remains as it is now. I think it really rams it home because of its size. I mean, because it is so small, and this is one of the best examples we have of these temperate forests, this Atlantic oak rainforest. This is one of the best examples we have, and yet it's so small, 5 square kilometres. It's sobering just how much we've left, how much we've lost. And when we're up on top of the hill looking out, there's a lot of gold colour because there's lots of native trees, but further out into Knapdale, it's mostly non-native spruce, larch, things like that, things that have been brought here. So yes, it is heavily forested in a lot of Argyll, but it doesn't have the same value in terms of its biodiversity and its heritage, its natural heritage, as places like this do.